So that's the first type. You have people that are hypocrites, and that's why the hadiths about Dhu Wajhain are because they're basically hypocrites. And obviously the Prophet ﷺ had these people were in Medina, and they would go listen to the Sahaba and they'd say, "Nahnu ma'akum," and then when they would go to the Quraysh or to the Jews, they would say, "No, no, we're really with you, we're not with them." And so these are two-faced people. It's interesting that the Arabs use the same word that we have in English. I'm sure the Turks have the same, because this is a universal type of character. You find them in every culture, two-faced people. And then you have what are called the ma'ma'iyun, and these are just people that are, they're just non-confrontational type people, and they don't like, they just ana ma'ak. So they're not really so much two-faced, they're multifaceted, because they're pretty much, they don't have enough spine to take positions on anything, so they just go along with everybody. And the Prophet ﷺ warned about being from these type of people. And Imam Malik also said, you know, if you're with people, just be silent unless there's a reason to speak. So, but there's always, and we know in group dynamics, social psychology, there's been a lot of studies that people will go along with a group. You know, the man in South Africa they interviewed him about, I think he reaching 105. And the interviewer said, you know, is there any perks in reaching 105? And he said, no more peer pressure. So obviously there's a lot of, you know, young people are particularly susceptible to this, because especially at school, you get into group and herd mentality. And there's an element to humanity that is, we are herd creatures, like other herds, creatures. There aren't that many species that Allah has made that don't gather in groups. And humans are one of them. And herd mentality is a type of mentality. The Qur'an in some ways could be read, from one perspective, could be read as a book of individuals going up against groupthink. Because you will find almost all of the people that are on the truth in the Qur'an are individuals, and they're always going up against a group of people that have gone astray. And so it's a very interesting aspect to the Quranic narrative. And that's why what's sad is the danger of Islam becoming a groupthink, where, for instance, one of the things Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya said about the revolutions is, he said that in these revolutions, the mi'yar, the standard, becomes the revolution and not the truth. So once a revolution starts, you're either a revolutionary or you're a counter-revolutionary. There's no more debate, because it's a fitna. And so suddenly nobody can speak openly without getting their head crushed, right? And this is what happened in France with the reign of terror. Robespierre comes along, and suddenly all the counter-revolutionaries, anybody that criticizes the revolution, has to go, including some of the people that started it, like Marat, right? He had him assassinated, even though his pen was one of the great instigators of the revolutionary fervor in France. So that's what happens, is that the revolution becomes the mi'yar, and people fall into that herd mentality, and suddenly a scholar can't even speak. They might have a different perspective. One of the things Confucius said in his Analects is that when everybody says this is good, that is bad. When everyone says this is good, that is bad. And that's one of the blessings of our tradition, is there always has been dissenting voices in everything. Because if you squelch dissent, if you get rid of dissent, you don't allow for the possibility of alternative perspectives that are often very important. And this is something really, really important, because the principled people have principles. And sometimes they don't compromise those principles in certain situations when everybody else thinks you should compromise them. Now, they could be right or wrong in that given situation, but people are entitled to their opinions in that way, if their opinions based on sound criteria. And that's why we have methodologies. Like, we have a tradition. In our ethics, we have a ethical tradition of reasoning. And so you can arrive at different ethical conclusions. But if the reasoning is sound, because not every situation has one clear answer, if the situation is sound, if the reasoning is sound, we can arrive at two different conclusions. I have to acknowledge yours and you should acknowledge mine. But if the reasoning is not sound, and that can be pointed out, then that's a different matter. Then it becomes mu'anid, somebody who's obstinate and refuses to budge on that. So basically that's what he's warning us about, being these people that just go and you're with these people, I'm with you, and then you're with these people, I'm with you, and you don't take positions. And he says if you're doing it to get secrets from them, like spies do this, and spies will infiltrate groups, and we have agent provocateurs. In the United States, we had several, almost all the cases of people that were tried in these terrorist cases were actually people that were on the internet, and somebody would contact them because they might have some radical writings, but they weren't doing anything other than just voicing some radical opinions. But then they would send in these undercover people, and they would actually say, oh, let's go do this, or let's go do that. And then these people would go along with it, and suddenly, you know, they've got their phony bomb strapped to their vest, and they're going down to blow something up, and then the sting comes in, and they find out that the guy that was with them was working for them all along. And that was an entrapment situation. Now, obviously, I mean, what the person was doing was wrong, irrespective, but would have he done that thing had they never contacted him and gotten him to do that? I mean, the idea is a preemptive, this is called preemptive police work, which is a very strange way to go, because traditionally that is not how Western police work was designed. It was not designed to be preemptive. So, but obviously terrorism is, it's not a new problem, but it certainly has some new manifestations that have become much more dangerous than previous situations in the past. So next one.
If, on the other hand, he desired to rectify the split between the two parties, and intentions are the elixir that rectifies actions, then his deed is most excellent. As for one who is simply courteous to each group and sincere in that, then he is not to be considered among the two-faced people.
Right, good. So what he's saying is, elixir is, in elixir, it's taken from the Arabic elixir. Elixir is the thing that transmutes a base metal into a precious metal. And so he's using an alchemical metaphor where somebody's acting as an elixir to take a bad situation and turn it into a good situation. He said if that's their intention, that's not a bad thing. So he goes to two groups, and he's with this group and he's with that group, but he's really trying to rectify between the two groups. So that's very different from... Now also, mujamalat. Amma idha jamala kullan minhuma. So mujamalat are tricky because you can fall into a type of hypocrisy also, but there's courtesies and decorum. In certain situations, you'll find yourself in a situation where you might not agree with the situation, but you know there's a difference of opinion about it. And so because of the unique situation that you find yourself in, you might tend to not do anything and be with the people and do what are called mujamalat. Now that can get you into trouble as well. So you could be in a gathering, for instance, and you might not agree with what's going on in the gathering, or other people might think it's a bad thing, but you found yourself in it for whatever reasons, and then you just do your best to make the best of a difficult situation. Those situations do arise in life, and the Arabs say, دارهم ما دمت في دارهم وارضيهم ما دمت في أرضيهم وحييهم ما دمت في حييهم. You know, like mudarat, the difference between mudarat, you know, mudarat are where you're not compromising your principles. So it's not nifaq, because there's a very different between mudahanat. وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ. You know, they want you to go along with them. I'm okay, you're okay type situation when they're not okay. That's a very different situation from mudarat. Mudarat is where you just have a, you know, you're courteous with people and you treat them, and especially if you're in their land. وَارْضِهِمْ مَا دُمْتَ فِي أَرْضِهِمْ. if you're in somebody's land, you're a guest, and you don't want to be a rude guest. So, and when in Rome, do as the Romans do, with the caveat, as long as they're not doing something haram, because the Romans did a lot of haram things. But if they were just doing something that was from their culture or tradition, then you can go along with it. That's all he's saying, that's not being dhu wajhain. It's basically just being polite and being a gentleman. Naam.
إفتاء مستفت تراه يغتزي به توصلا لغير جائز كذا الشهادة بأمر قدر من كنهه خلاف ما قد ظهر. Also prohibited is giving a fatwa to someone who is seeking a legal opinion by which he intends to realize something that is in fact prohibited. Prohibited also is a mufti's testimony in a case where he knows that its reality is quite different from what it appears to be, due to some foreknowledge he has about one of the people involved.
So you don't have al-ifta'u bil-da'ifi wa-tasaru'i ila al-fatawi mana'u wa mana'u. Some mistakes in that text. So you add this one, al-ifta'u bil-da'ifi wa-tasaru'u ila al-fatawi mana'u wa mana'u, and then ifta'a mustaftin tarahu yaqtazi. So basically what he's saying is it's not permissible to give a fatwa with a weak opinion. Now this is certainly where the majority of our tradition reached this point several hundred years ago. And this is a whole, really it's a muhadara to get into this, but I'm going to try to give you a summation because this is important to understand. If you look at the Islamic tradition, you have basically 5 dominant schools today. You have a few others like the Zaydiyya and the Ibadiyya in Oman, but you have 5 dominant schools. You have the Ja'fari school, which is what the Shia tradition follows. And they have a fiqh based on Ja'far al-Sadiq. Ja'far al-Sadiq is considered one of the imams of Ahl Sunnah. So each one claims him, but Ja'far al-Sadiq, Imam Malik relates hadith from him in the Muwatta. So he's one of the rijal of Imam Malik in the Muwatta, and Imam Malik took from him. So he's a teacher of the Sunni imams. I think Abu Hanifa also, I'm not sure if there's, but I think Abu Hanifa also took from Ja'far al-Sadiq. So if you have the Ja'fari madhab, the Shia follow that in fiqh. In Aqidah, they have their own Aqidah. But the 4 Imams, Imam Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, Imam al-Azam, the greatest Imam, he has the greatest number of followers. The next is Imam Malik, because Abu Hanifa is born in 79, Imam Malik's born probably in 89. There's 89, 90, 91 they say. And then Imam Shafi'i is born in 150. And then you have Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, 189, I think. So you have the 4 Imams in that order. Abu Hanifa is the oldest, he's considered from the Tabi'een. And then you have Imam Malik, there's a khilaf, is he Tabi' or Tabi'een? And then you have Imam Shafi'i, he's Tabi'een. And then you have Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he's Tabi'een also. Imam Abu Hanifa and Malik met and they exchanged opinions, but they're not considered, one is not considered a student of the other. Imam Shafi'i was a student of Imam Malik, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal was a student of Imam Shafi'i, but also considered a qareen for him because they took from each other. So there's they're mutual in that way. These 4 men, even though there were several schools. There were probably around 13 dominant schools at that time. You had the Awza'i madhab, Layth ibn Sa'ad had a madhab, Sufyan al-Thawri had a madhab. So you had these different madhabs, Dawud al-Zahiri's madhab. All those madhabs die out, and these 4 madhabs become the established schools. Each madhab had a methodology that emerges. Now, if you look, I'm just going to use the Maliki because that's the one I know. If you look at the Maliki madhab, or I'm familiar with, astaghfirullah. If you look at the Maliki madhab, You had several Maliki schools. You had a Khurasani Maliki school. You had an Iraqi Maliki school. You had an Indian Maliki school. There were Malikis in India. You had a Yemeni Maliki school. You had a Hijazi Maliki school. You had a Najdi Maliki school. You had a Syrian Maliki school. You had an Egyptian Maliki school. And you had a Andalusian and Moroccan Maliki school. So you have all of these different Maliki schools. And all of them had their own teachers. The Baghdadi school was a very prominent school with people like Abu Bakr al-Baqallani, Qadi Abdul Wahab. These were great Maliki scholars. And then you had the Andalusian Maliki school. The Egyptian school becomes the dominant school. The reason for that, Allahu Alam. It's tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other schools, the Iraqi school is a very interesting school, but the Maliki school becomes dominant from Egypt. And the great Ibn al-Qasim is really the dominant voice in that school. The Medini school died out. Ibn Majishun, Mutarraf, these were great scholars, but it dies out. Their opinions are still in the books, but they die out. From the Egyptian school, you have Ibn al-Qasim. Ibn Wahbin is one of the Egyptian masters. Ibn al-Qasar, all these different Malikis are in Egypt, but for some reason the dominant opinion is Ibn al-Qasim's. So the Mudawwana becomes the book. You had 4 books, the Mawaziyah, the Wadiha, the Utbiyah, and the Mudawwana. These are the Ummahat of the Madhab. But for some reason, the Mudawwana becomes the dominant book. That book then there's Tahdhib. And so over time, different people add their opinions, and the school emerges. The Egyptian Maliki school becomes dominant wherever the Malikis are. So even the Moroccans, despite the fact that they had their own school, they adopt the Egyptian school. The Tunisians had their own school, they adopt the Egyptian school. The Andalusians, their school dies out. They didn't adopt the Egyptian school. They had their own school, and it lasted until the Andalusian Islam died out. But the school has, even the Egyptian school has several opinions. So just to give you a few examples, Ibn Wahbin, great muhaddith, great faqih, student of Imam Malik, a direct student, qareen of Ibn al-Qasim. He was of the opinion that, like the Shafi'is, you could join prayers anytime you were traveling, even when you were stationary in a place. So Shafi'i madhab has that opinion. Ibn Wahab from the Malikis have that opinion. For some reason, the dominant opinion is not that opinion. It's Ibn al-Qasim's opinion that you had to be moving while you traveled. So what he's saying is, if you're giving a fatwa in a madhab, and somebody who's a Maliki asks you, can I join my prayers when I'm traveling? You don't give them the opinion of Ibn Wahab. You give them the opinion of Ibn al-Qasim. Do you see? You don't give him the opinion of Ibn Asakir or the opinion of Qadi Abdul Wahab or the opinion of Ibn Majishun. In the opinion of Ibn Majishun, he said, La bas an yaqbid. That was the opinion. The Iraqi school left their hands at the side. The Egyptian school left their hand at the side. So the Iraqi school and the Egyptian school maintained one way. Some of the other Malikis said, it's an either-or issue. They didn't make a big deal out of it. The Andalusians didn't make a big deal out of it. They said you could do either one. Ibn Abdul Barr is Andalusian. So that's just an example. I'm just explaining to you that the madhabs have what's called the mashhur. The mashhur is what the majority of the scholars of that madhab, of the agreed upon methodology of the madhab. When you get into the Hanafi school, you're going to find there are different schools also. You have Indian schools. And even the Barelvi and the Deobandi schools will differ on fiqh issues, right? As well as aqidah issues. So you'll get these different schools. You have a Syrian Hanafi school. You have a Turkish Hanafi school. Then you get into what's called urf, which is the cultural practices that get incorporated into the religion. So you have the urf of Ahli Fas. So for instance, in the qira'ah of the Qur'an in a group, some of the early Maliki positions, they didn't agree with that. It was makruh. The later Malikis said, no, it's a good thing. So the qira'at al-Quran in a group, which is the Shafi'i position, according to Imam al-Nawawi in At-Tadhkar. So those are all debates that go on, but as we move into this last phase of Islam on planet Earth, obviously these things have been breaking down considerably. And there are definitely, in Western Islam, there are situations where you need to give people rakhas. That's the opinion of Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayyaf, my teacher, hafidhullah. And so the mufti has to have some flexibility and be aware that that these things worked very well in very integral Muslim societies where everybody was held together. Now you're finding a real disintegration and fragmentation of the Muslims. And so this is going to get harder and harder to prevail upon people, the idea that you follow, the dominant position. But this is certainly in the ibadat and things like that, it's the best way to hold the Muslims together and keep us harmonious and unified. Because one of the nice things when you go into a Turkish masjid here, if you notice, the uniformity is amazing. And they all say, have you noticed how they all say the salam at the same time? I mean, you feel like you're in the army. They just, assalamu alaikum. I mean, everybody turns at the same time and they turn the other way. That uniformity was all over the Muslim world because people followed the same schools in areas, right? And there's a real blessing in that, to have that type of uniformity. On the other hand, we're living in a globalized environment where people from different schools are mixing now, and that's been the case in places like Egypt and Syria and Palestine. You've always had Hanafis and Shafi'is and Hanbalis, even small groups, and certainly on in Arabia also. I mean, it's amazing. You go to Mecca and Medina, and everybody is basically praying the same prayer. It's pretty awesome that we can go to Mecca and you're praying next to an Ibadi or a Zaydi or a Ja'fari or a Maliki or a Hanafi or a Hanbali, and yet it's pretty much the same prayer. There's going to be slight differences. This guy moves his finger. That might be a little distracting to you because you're not used to it. He's put his hands at his side. This guy's got him under the belly button. This guy's over the belly button. Some have him over the heart. Some are doing something where they're grabbing their neck. But the basic form is the same. They're praying, they're standing, they're doing the ruku', they're coming up from ruku', they go into sajda. It's a miracle of Islam that we have this same prayer. And the same tajweed, the same Qur'an, agreed upon. Alhamdulillah, we have agreed upon qira'at. Could you imagine if there was differences and people wouldn't pray behind him because no, he's reciting and that's wrong and that tajweed is wrong? It's a unified tajweed. Warsh, they might be reciting Warsh, but that's agreed upon reading. Hafs, agreed upon reading. Ibn Kathir, agreed upon. It's amazing. We have so many elements of unity that are extraordinary in this religion. And these are the things that we should focus on. In terms of the khilafat, the best approach is just acknowledge the khilafat. The only way we're going to be unified as a community and be strong with our differences is to acknowledge khilafat, broad-based khilafat, as long as they don't go outside of the parameters of what's acceptable, right? Have a good opinion of people. If you see somebody doing something that normally you wouldn't think they were doing, just think maybe they were in a situation where they didn't know what to do, and so they just did something, right? I mean, this is what you have to do. Allahu Akbar. I've been in many situations like that, thinking, I hope people have a good opinion. Fasting, the fasting, the 10 for expiation. Sarcasm. I mean, sarcasm, it depends on what you're doing, which is sarcastic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses sarcasm in the Qur'an. Dhuq, innaka anta al-aziz al-kareem, that Allah tells them to taste the hellfire and look at you, aren't you noble and powerful? So there are situations, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was certainly very strong with some of the kuffar of Quraysh. So it would depend on situations, but generally istihza, mocking people, is completely alien to the tradition, and certainly sarcasm in certain situations it might be appropriate. But generally, it's best to avoid those type situations, making fun of people, mocking people. There's a guy now whose father just got arrested in Iran because he put up on Facebook mocking Shia imams. He's, I guess, an atheist or something, or doesn't believe in religion. And the CNN interviewed him, and he said, you know, nothing's sacred. Everything is open to mockery. And that's part of the age we're living in. It's going to get worse. It's just part of the time we're living in. Yeats has a famous poem, Easter 1916, "Come let us mock at the great that had such burdens on the mind and toiled so hard and late to leave some monument behind, nor thought of the leveling wind. Come let us mock at the wise with all of those calendars whereon they kept old aching eyes. They never saw how seasons run, now but gape at the sun. Come let us mock at the good that fancied goodness might be gay and sick of solitude might proclaim a holiday." Mock mockers after that would not help the good, the wise, the great, that would not lift a hand to help the good, the wise, the great, to bow that foul storm out, the foul storm of mockery. For we traffic in mockery. Right? I mean, this is a mocking age, and that's what he was talking about. So, you know, it's best to avoid people like that. كَفَيْنَاكَ الْمُسْتَهْزِينَ. Allah says, we'll take care of the mockers. Right? Allah says, we'll take care of the mockers. It's a very low group to be in. You don't want to be in the people of istihza, huzu. In fact, when they accused him of mocking them, he said, "A'udhu billahi an akuna min al-jahilin." I seek refuge that I should be an ignorant person. So the mocker is actually an ignorant person. They're just displaying their ignorance in mocking. And you should always have compassion for people. I mean, the worst people are people that mock handicapped people and make fun of people. You know, you have comedians that just make fun of people that have Alzheimer's disease or who have handicaps, you know, stuttering or whatever. They just make fun of them. It's really dangerous to do that. So may Allah protect us from the mockers. If Imam Abu Hanifa was considered from the Tabi'een, shouldn't we follow his madhab without disrespect to the other madhabs? That's obviously a Hanafi person. I mean, he was very young when he met the Tabi'een, but I mean, he's not, you know, he met, yeah, it's not like he lived amongst the Tabi'een and was part of the Tabi'een ulama. He was part of the Tabi'een in terms of his contemporaries, but he did have the blessing of meeting from what I heard in all the four schools, the most lenient opinion about living in a non-Muslim country is if you are giving da'wah and it does not affect your religion. Isn't fiqh al-aqliyat based on giving people license, which is against one of the conditions of being able to live in non-Muslim countries? I'm asking for clarification. You know, this is a khilaf position. Some of the ulama were adamant that you should not live in non-Muslim lands. The Prophet ﷺ said that the fire of the mushrikeen and the believers should not, you shouldn't see their fire, they shouldn't see your fire. In other words, you shouldn't live close enough for them to see the lights of your house or you to see the lights of their house. The ulama that permit living say that that's only if you're in a state of war with them. So if you're under threat from them. But in societies where there's truces with the Muslims, where there's civil society, then they don't. And the hadith of Fudayk is the hadith that Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayy quotes, where Fudayk was told that he had to make hijrah because his people weren't Muslim, and the Prophet ﷺ said, wherever you find good, حَيْثُ أَصَبْتَ خَيْرًا فَأَقِمْ, wherever you find good, then you can reside there. And he told them, أَقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَأْتِ الزَّكَاةَ وَاهْجُرَ السُّوءَ, and avoid any evil that they do. So if they do evil, don't do it with them. And so it's a khilaf issue. If you're in a non-Muslim country, you should definitely be involved in some way of helping to give a better image of Islam, undeniably. So, any other? Yeah, I think that's good for now. Last one. What is the Islamic stance on swearing on the Bible, as in a president being sworn in? I mean, a Muslim should not swear on the Bible, because the dominant opinion, there's two opinions. One opinion is that the meanings have been changed. The other opinion is that the actual words in the Hebrew Bible have been changed. So that's a khilaf, al-mabani or ma'ani. The dominant opinion is that the actual words have been changed also. Imam al-Ghazali, there's a book attributed to him which argues that the gospel, even in the four gospels as they exist today, can be interpreted esoterically to be in conformity with the Islamic positions. So that book is probably apocryphal, but if it's not, it's still stretching. And that's a type of genius that people are able to do that, and he was certainly a great genius. So it's certainly one way of doing da'wah to Christians, by saying, you know, we don't have a problem with your Bible, but listen to our interpretation of what you think that means. So, yeah, Muslims shouldn't swear on a Bible, though. They should, you can make an oath on the Qur'an. And Keith Ellison in the US, when he swore on Congress, he actually swore, and it was a very politically astute move, which was to use the Thomas Jefferson Bible that was in his library that George Sale translated from, what's that? What did I say? Well, Bible in Greek means book. So I meant al-kitab, yeah. Biblios, the book, yeah, the Qur'an, thank you. So, sabqul lisan, that's a slip of the tongue. It's one of the problems with all these recordings and everything. It's like you say things and you misquote something, and I'm tired. My brain's been fagging lately. Make dua for me. Yeah. I used to, like, you know, they say the worst tribulation for a person is to have a quick answer for everything. So Allah's taken that away from me. Alhamdulillah. My answers are a lot slower these days. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. I did want to say, though, about the fatwa, being quick in your fatwa, because that was the other part I didn't mention. The early ulama were very, very wary of being quick in fatwa. They took their time with fatwa. They never gave a fatwa quickly. And Sahnun said, Wallahi, I'm never asked about a question except I know the answer, I know where I learned it, I know which page it's on, and I can quote it directly, but I don't do it because I don't want people to come after me and take me as an example of being too quick in their fatwa. And I was sitting once with, because I used to go to the Darul Ifta in the Emirates when I was a student, and this was 30 years ago. I was with Sheikh Abdullah Wal Siddiq, who was one of my teachers from Mauritania, Hafidhullah, an incredible scholar, just ocean of knowledge. I mean, one of the most learned people I've ever met in my life, and memorized everything, encyclopedic knowledge. And I remember that people used to come and ask him questions, and he would tell them to come back tomorrow. And I knew he knew the answer. And I remember once these two Egyptians came, and they were workers, and he asked them a question, and he said, "Ta'al ghadan, ana ukhbiruka inshallah." And this guy turned to me and he said, "Da bi'arf haga?" You know, like, does he know anything? I said, "Hada bahr." It's the ocean. But they're so used to the ulama giving quick answers that they assume that if you don't have it right on the top of your head, you're not an alim. But the Mauritanians are very, if you ask them a fatwa, Imam Malik, in Maliki fiqh, the fatwa is called nazila, which means musibah. It means calamity. We call it nawazil. In the Maliki tradition, fatwas are called nawazil. Nazila is a calamity. So fatwas are called calamities in Maliki tradition. And if Imam Malik was asked a question, he used to say, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." I mean, think about that. You know, that